Scripture reading this morning will be from Exodus chapter 3, verse 1 through 14. Exodus chapter 3, verse 1 through 14. I'll be reading from the King James Version. Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the backside of the desert, and came to the mountain of God, even to Horeb. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. And Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burning. And when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called unto him out of the midst of the bush. And he said, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. And he said, Draw nigh hither, put off thy shoes from off thy feet, for the place whereon thou standest is holy ground. Moreover, he said, I am the God of thy father, and the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people, which are in Egypt, and have heard their cry by reason of their taskmakers. For I know their sorrows, and I am come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land unto a good land, and a large, unto a land flowing with milk and honey, unto the place of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Now therefore, behold, the cry of the children of Israel is come unto me, and I have also seen the oppression wherewith the Egyptians oppress them. Come now therefore, and I will send thee unto Pharaoh, that thou mayest bring forth my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. And Moses said unto God, Who am I, that I should go unto Pharaoh, and that I should bring forth the children of Israel out of Egypt? And he said, Certainly I will be with thee, and this shall be a token unto thee that I have sent thee. When thou hast brought forth the people out of Egypt, ye shall serve God upon this mountain. And Moses said unto God, Behold, when I come unto the children of Israel, and shall say unto them, The God of your fathers hath sent me unto you, and they shall say to me, What is his name? And shall I say unto them, and what shall I say unto them? And God said unto Moses, I am that I am. And he said, Thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am hath sent me unto you.
Good job, Darren. Good morning, brethren and friends. We're happy to see you here on this beautiful Lord's Day morning. Grateful for the opportunity that we have to assemble today in the last hour during our Bible study, and in this hour now as we worship God together. We're thankful that for all who have led us in our worship up to this point. We're thankful that you are here with us today. As has already been mentioned, we have guests visiting with us today, and what a beautiful day it is following such tragedy throughout the states through the storms. Again, we're thankful they weren't too severe in this area, but as has been mentioned, they were in other areas, and we want to do all we can to pray for those people and lend assistance as we have opportunity. Our study will begin in Exodus, but we're going to go back to chapter 1 in just a moment. I want us to think for a moment what Taryn read for us, talking about verse 14 especially, when God said, I am. Probably don't stop to think about that as much as we should. When we read Exodus chapter 3, maybe in our daily Bible reading or whatever it might be, it's just the next verse, right? We just keep reading. We stop and think about who God is. It's so easy in life, in day-to-day life, to not perhaps give him the fullest respect that he deserves. Not in a way that we mean to be disrespectful, but just in our day-to-day life, do we sometimes remember who the I am is? Do we think about that? I know sometimes in my prayer life, I have to stop and say, wait a minute, is there reverence here? Is there the respect here that I should be giving? Think about here, God is sending Moses back to Egypt to free his people from the Egyptians. And God is having this conversation with Moses. The bush that does not burn up, right? It's burning, but it's still there. And again in verse 14, as Taryn just read for us, God said to Moses, I am who I am. We could probably read this one verse and sit in silence for the next 15 or 20 minutes and preach a better sermon than I can preach this morning. And just thinking about, I am. What we're going to do today is we're going to notice some examples of how the I am worked in the lives of people, but mainly those who were in power. I want us to notice together how these people who were in great roles of power, kings of nations, rulers of the world, and yet here is the one true God. Here is the I am showing who is really in power. So let's go back to Exodus chapter 1 and let's notice Pharaoh and the I am. Now to be clear, the Pharaoh in Exodus chapter 1 is not the same Pharaoh as the one in Exodus chapter 3. Okay, the Pharaoh in Exodus chapter 3, we're not looking at him. We might look at him next Sunday night. I'm still thinking it through. We might look at that Pharaoh next Sunday night if you want to read the first 10 or 12 chapters of the book of Exodus this week. That Pharaoh, he learns who the I am is, does he not? The Pharaoh of Exodus 3 and the plagues that will come upon the people. This Pharaoh is not the Pharaoh of the end of the book of Genesis. That was a nice king. That was a nice Pharaoh to Joseph and his family. As we begin in Exodus chapter 1 and verse 8, this is a Pharaoh that dies at the end of chapter 2. That's where I'm coming from. But this Pharaoh, he's not kind to the descendants of Abraham either, the people of Joseph. He's not kind to them either. So let's notice the Pharaoh who thinks he's powerful, who thinks that he's calling the shots, who thinks that he is in control. And the point is, if God is in control of kings, he's in control of us, is he not? In Exodus chapter 1 and verse 8, now there arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph. He said to the people, look, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply and it happen in the event of war that they also join our enemies and fight against us, and so go up out of the land. In verse 11, therefore they set taskmasters over them to afflict them with their burdens, and they built for Pharaoh supply cities, Pithom and Ramesses. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew, and they were in dread of the children of Israel. Now I want to notice something with you. We're going to see this at least 3 times. I forgot to check it, maybe 4, just in our text that's going to span from chapter 1 and verse 8 to chapter 2 and verse 10. And I broke it up to place emphasis upon the different sections, but it's just one straight study that you see on the screen. This is a great example of providence and faith working together. It's God working, but it's not in a miraculous way. That comes later with the 10 plagues that I mentioned earlier. That's miracles. That's God working as miracle. This in chapters 1 and 2, it's God working, but through natural means, through natural ways. God is blessing the people, but through natural. A miracle is, as you see what's going on, God just stops it and just ends it immediately. And that's not what we read in chapters 1 and 2. We read that God is working, God is blessing the faith of the people, but through a natural way. And it's this is a great study, Exodus chapters 1 and 2, to notice this study of how God was blessing the people, but through the natural events of life. And we see, beginning as we were just here a moment ago in verse 12, they multiplied and they grew. God was blessing the people of Israel. God was blessing their faith. Perhaps we're a faithful congregation at Wood Avenue. We're having another baby shower today, are we not? I mean, we just keep having babies here. Here we are. Here we go in verse 13 now. So the Egyptians made the children of Israel serve with rigor. And they made their lives bitter with hard bondage, in mortar, in brick, and in all manner of service in the field. All their service in which they made them serve was with rigor. In verse 15, then the king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives. Here's the next step. And I think I put this in the bulletin. I can't remember, but I believe I put this in the bulletin, how sinful people, they always try to out-sin their last sin. You know, Pharaoh starts here and that doesn't work, so he's going to the next step and that doesn't work. And then in chapter 2, we'll go to the next step that let's kill all the male children. And so that's what happens a lot of times. When a sinful person doesn't get his way, then he'll just the next time he's going to try to do the next level, the next step. And that's what happens quite often. So in verse 15, the king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives, of whom the name one was Shiphrah and the other was Puah. And he said, when you do the duties of a midwife for the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stools, if it is a son, then you shall kill him. But if it is a daughter, then she shall live. So again, here's our next step. He's trying to out-sin himself. Okay, the hard work, the rigor, it didn't work the way Pharaoh wanted it to work. So he's saying, okay, so now let's kill the male children. That will be a way to slow them down. But again, we're seeing the faith of the Israelite people, the faith of these midwives, and we see God's providence rewarding their faith. They're continuing to grow because then we see in verse 17, but the midwives feared God. That is a great example. That's a great Devo thought if you have a devotional coming up. You know, here were the Egyptians learning to fear God, not scared of him, but to obey him because they had been around godly people. Are the people of the world that you work with and go to school with, did they learn to obey God and fear God by your example? It's a great example right there. So they feared God, and they did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved the male children alive. So the king of Egypt called for the midwives and said to them, why have you done this thing and saved the male children alive? And the midwife said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are lively and give birth before the midwives come to them. Therefore God dealt with the midwives, and the people multiplied and grew very mightily. Providence of God working together with faith. And so it was because the midwives feared God that he provided households for them. So Pharaoh commanded all his people, saying, every son who is born you shall cast into the river, and every daughter you shall save alive. So again, we see the steps. Make it hard on them. Make life hard on them. People continue to grow. This is the I am working. This is who is working. Kill the male children at birth. Faith, the working of I am, the people continue to grow. Okay, fine. Then even after they're born, still kill the male children. That's the life they were living in. You get into chapter 2. Exodus chapter 2. And a man of the house of Levi went and took as wife a daughter of Levi. So the woman conceived and bore a son. And when she saw that he was a beautiful child, she hid him 3 months. But when she could no longer hide him, she took an ark of bulrushes for him, daubed it with asphalt and pitch, and put the child in it, and laid it in the reeds by the river's bank. And his sister stood afar off to know what would be done to him. Then the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, and her maidens walked along the riverside. And when she saw the ark among the reeds, she sent her maid to get it. And when she had opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby wept, for she had compassion on him, and said, this is one of the Hebrew children. In verse 7, then his sister, that's Moses' sister, the baby's sister, Miriam, we know her name to be, said to Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and call a nurse for you, and from the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for you? Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." So the maiden went and called the child's mother. Then Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed him. And the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. So she called his name Moses, because I drew him out of the water. Now I want us to think about this as we talk about the I am. Pharaoh, again, he's just trying to make things extremely difficult, tragic upon the Hebrew people. Let's kill the male children. If not at birth, still just kill them. And we need to tie in Hebrews chapter 11 here in your own reading, because we know that we talk about the faith of Moses in Hebrews chapter 11, how, he had the world at his hand. He had anything that he wanted, but he chose not to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin. That's what he could have had in Pharaoh's house. But it's often overlooked that the Hebrews writer also comments on the faith of Moses' parents. It's easy in our reading just to notice Moses, right? Because he's our main character. But it also talks about his parents hiding him in their faith. So again, we say, here's providence working together with faith. They had enough faith in God that they're willing to take this 3-month-old child. And you stop and think about this for just a moment of what it would mean to leave your 3-month-old somewhere. But if that's not enough, they leave him in the river. Are there any dangers in the Tennessee River? What about their river at that time? Are there any dangerous ways in that a 3-month-old could die? But you see this faith working for them. God is working his plan through them. And in one way, Moses is found, of course, the sister's watching. But I always think, this is a pretty good deal if you're the mom of Moses, because you're getting to raise your son, rear your child in a way so he knows about his people, he knows about the one true God. And you're getting paid while doing it. Wouldn't you like that, moms? Wouldn't you like for someone to pay you to raise your own child? That'd be a pretty good little deal, would it not? And so here's the I am working. But this is what I want us to point out on this particular text. You have over here Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, I suppose the most powerful nation in the world at that time. And he thinks he's calling the shots. He thinks that it's all about his control. Make life hard on them. That didn't work. Kill the male children at birth. That didn't work. Kill the male children anyway. He thinks he's calling the shots. But over here is the I am. Tell you what, Pharaoh. I'm going to raise up a deliverer who will deliver my people out of your land. Now, he's dead by the time this happens. But my plan is working. Predetermined plan, Ephesians chapter 1. The plan that goes back to Abraham, Genesis 12. I have a plan, and it was my plan to bring my people into your land. And I have a plan that I can get them out of your land. So you think you're calling the shots. You think you're in control of all of this. But let me tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to raise up someone, an Israelite, a descendant of Abraham, to deliver my people out of Egypt. And here's what we're going to do. You're going to take care of the child. Your household. Your daughter. You're going to provide for the child. You're going to give this child what is that not amazing? I mean, that's just awesome when you stop and think about it. I never really thought about that till just recently reading it. I was like, wait a minute, here's God, and he's working through one of the most powerful men alive in that time, and God says, you're my puppet. you're going to do what I want done. And Pharaoh doesn't even really know what's going on at this time, does he? All Pharaoh knows is, here's his daughter. She's found this child. And again, you see the providence of God working it out to where his mother gets to train him and teach him to help build that faith, give him his own faith in God that we read about in Hebrews chapter 11. That's just amazing to me. Charlie, I'm going to pull a JP here. We're going to go to slide Uzziah, 2 Chronicles 26. Because we're going to make this a two-part lesson. I want to respect your time, and I want to respect our study of the scriptures and not rush through this. If you want to prepare for tonight, read the book of Esther, chapters 3, 4, and 5, and Luke chapter 2. We'll save Haman. Haman learned who the I am is. Esther chapters 3, Esther chapters, just read the whole book. It's only 10 chapters, and you'll do good. And then Luke chapter 2, that's the two that we'll cover tonight. But for today, 2 Chronicles chapter 26, King Uzziah. It might say Azariah in your translation, Uzziah or Azariah. He's going to learn a little bit about who the I am is. Now here's a king that if you were to read the entire chapter, you see that in the first 15 verses, things are going pretty good for him. Things are going pretty good for him. He's doing the will of God. And as Mike mentioned this morning, we just went through a lengthy study of the kings. And you see in one moment they're doing good. And another moment you're thinking, what were you thinking? And as I read that, I have to immediately stop and remind myself, Ricky, what are you thinking? Because sometimes you make similar decisions, don't I? So this King Uzziah or Azariah, he's doing pretty good. He's being faithful. Especially in a time when a lot of kings were not faithful. And in verse 16, the New King James text, but when he was strong, his heart was lifted up to his destruction. You might want to jot down in your notes 1 Corinthians chapter 9 and verse 27, chapter 10 and verse 12. That's when Paul would talk about, it's easy. It was possible for him to fall away. Let him who thinks he stands take heed lest he fall. 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 12. We need to learn from these people, learn from Scripture how easy it is. It is when I have arrived. It's when I think that I've mastered it. Think about a child. We're learning to ride bicycles in the Berger house without training wheels. Right now we're very careful. We're very cautious. We're taking it easy. We're riding on softer ground. First thing we learned, day one, no training wheels, is how to wreck, right? You need to know how to wreck the right way so you don't get yourself hurt, okay? But it's in time when we've mastered the bicycle and we're brave, that's when we're really going to wipe out, right? You might still have some scars on the elbows and knees from childhood wipe, right? Here's a man who's arrived, Uzziah, or Azariah, the king. He's doing good. The Lord is blessing him in many ways in the first 15 verses. But in verse 16, when he was strong, his heart was lifted up to his destruction. For he transgressed against the Lord his God by entering the temple of the Lord to burn incense on the altar of incense. He is about to learn what happens when you go against the I am. So Azariah, the priest, went in after him, and with him were 80 priests of the Lord, valiant men. And when they withstood King Uzziah and said to him, it is not for you, Uzziah, to burn incense to the Lord, but for the priests, the sons of Aaron, who are consecrated to burn incense. Get out of the sanctuary, for you have trespassed. You shall have no honor from the Lord God. You have to really appreciate this priest and the other who went to the king. You don't have a right in here. You don't have a place in here. Get out of here. We don't think about that quite often when we study the Bible. Mike mentioned this as he was closing Bible class this morning. A lot of people have this misunderstood idea and view of grace. Here's a man who was not obeying God, and the faithful were saying, You don't have a right to be in here. You don't have a right to do what you're doing. Get out of here. The grace of God is always still there, but it had to be met with his obedience. And at this point, he was not obeying, because in verse 19, then we see Uzziah became furious, and he had a censer in his hand to burn incense. And while he was angry with the priest, leprosy broke out on his forehead before the priest and in the house of the Lord beside the incense altar. And Azariah, the chief priest, and all the priests looked at him, and there on his forehead he was leprous, so they thrust him out of the place. Indeed, he also hurried to get out, because the Lord had struck him. King Uzziah was a leper until the day of his death. Here's a king. The other one was Pharaoh. Here, now you have a king of the people of Israel. And he turns against God, and he learns who the I Am is. There's a lesson that we can learn. Let's go to that last slide, Charlie. Jesus, in having that conversation, John chapter 8, verse 58, before Abraham was, I am. We're like Pharaoh, we're like Uzziah, we're like Haman, we're like Caesar. We're before the I am. And what we're trying to show in this, what is now going to be a 2-part sermon, is his will is going to be done. It's so much better to be on his side, to be rewarded by him. Faith like those midwives, faith like Moses' parents, ultimately on the judgment day. You know, JP's going to come and lead us in a song in just a moment. And during the song, I want you to think about the words, but I also want us to think about this. One day, we're all going to stand before the I Am. So, yes, we're ending thinking about a congregation as a whole, but a congregation is made up of each individual member. The church at Wood Avenue, we have a lot of guests. You could place your own congregation here. Certainly, we want us all to consider our own lives and our response to God. I might think I'm in control, but I'm really not. I might think that I'm calling the shots, but I'm not. And I just need to humble myself, and I just need to say, God, just take over and let me release I want to release myself into you. I want to release what I want. I want to give it all to you. You are the great I am. And I just want you to use me in a way that will help myself, my family, my church family, and other people to go to heaven. I don't want to fight against you, God. Because one day, we're all going to stand before the I Am. If you're not prepared for that day, if you're not prepared for the judgment, we hope that you will consider seriously what you need to do to put on Christ in baptism as a believer, repenting of your sins if you're ready to do that. Or if as a baptized believer, you need to return and ask God for forgiveness, begin serving him once again. If there's anything that we can do to help you in your relationship with the I Am, please come as we stand and as we sing.